All right, ladies and gents, let's talk about defilade and dead space within your yard and how you could use certain tools in order to cover those areas of dead space and defilade, but also how you could utilize what we call fields of fire if you have multiple people in the home who are capable of defending your house against violent criminals. So here we have this example. We have a house, we have these trees, we have this little walkway here, we've got our sweet G-Wagon parked in the driveway. And all this is designed to do is just illustrate a house with trees and bushes. Now, anywhere from the home, so let's say you're in this window right here, if you're looking out from the house into the yard, anywhere that you cannot see behind, so for example, like behind this bush, behind this tree, behind this tree, these black circles with lines, we're going to call this dead space. So that's all it is areas that, in terms of like your direct line of sight, it's dead. You can't see it. And the opposite, usually dead space, is something called defilade. Defilade is usually a little bit more relative to, like, let's say that this is a hill going down. All of this over here would be dead space because you can't see beyond that hill, that natural curvature of the terrain. Whereas areas that are stuck behind trees and bushes, that's really just going to be more like dead space, although some people, it could be defilade. So don't get too confused on what is defilade, what is dead space. Just know that dead space is any area that from within your point of position, your advantageous point of view, your perspective, you cannot see behind. So what is there? A cat, a human, a rock, a dog, whatever it is, you can't see that area, that's considered dead space. And criminals are going to use dead space to their advantage, especially what we see right now with this crazy ass migrant shit. These guys are coming out, they are from these gangs in these Central American places, and they've got experience and they have some sort of tactic. So what a criminal will do when they're coming up on your house is they know that you can't see them. They're using these objects as what's called a screen. So anytime you have dead space or an area that you, from your position of vantage perspective, cannot see through or past, that item that's blocking your view, in this case the tree, that is called a screen. And this plays a big part in other areas of personal safety, like nefarious behavior, for example, or stalking, things of that nature. But lessons for another time. Just know that these items they're using to block your viewpoint of them is called a screen. And so what they'll do is they'll actually move from one position of cover and concealment, because concealment is the use of a screen so that the person, in this case you, looking out towards them, the criminal, cannot be seen. So that's a position of concealment. So for us, we call that dead space, but for the criminal or the person making the approach, they call that concealment. And then cover is going to be something that bullets cannot easily or readily pass through. So for example, a tree. Trees are fucking big as hell and they're thick as hell. And bullets, although they can eventually chop down a tree or big enough calibers can go through them and stuff, initially it's a pretty good point of cover, depending how big the tree is. So cover, bullets can't pass through. Concealment. These bushes, for example, not very good cover. Bullets pass right through that, but could be potentially good concealment. So again, what criminals will do is they will actually use these points of cover and or concealment, and they will move in what's called a bounding fashion towards your home. So for example, this guy here gets up and moves over to this next position of concealment. Then after he's set, this guy here moves up over, gets to this position of concealment. And what this does is it lowers their signature, so you don't just see a bunch of people moving in on your house. Your security cameras are less likely to pick up all of the minimal movement as opposed to that mass movement. And it also keeps their position hidden from you, so if you do see one, you're not seeing the other ones who are already in place. And in this case, what we're going to talk about are armed and very dangerous. So something to just be aware of. Criminals will use dead space as concealment from your perspective so that they can move upwards in a bounding fashion, if they're well trained, towards your home. So how do we combat, how do we defend our home against this type of stuff? Well, you're going to see a couple of different colors up here on the board. You're going to see orange or yellow, which is lights, and then you're going to see blue, which represents cameras. So the first thing that I would recommend you do at a very basic minimum is you have cameras on the corners of your building pointed down the axis As you can see here, like this camera's pointed inward this way, this camera's pointed in here this way, this camera's pointed out towards the driveway, this camera's pointing out towards the yard, etc. And if you have the resources available to you, I would even recommend things like setting up cameras further out, like even on trees, especially if you have a wireless camera and you have a good strong mesh network and you get good Wi-Fi signal, or just even do a wired one and just staple the wire, not through the wire, but staple the wire to secure it to the tree, paint it, have it run down into the ground, and then have it run up into your home security system monitor. So we're going to use lights and we're going to use cameras in order to mitigate the effectiveness of that dead space. And we do this a couple of different ways. Remember, lighting is used in both deterrence and detection, but when we're using lighting for deterrence, it's going to be continuous lighting. And so lighting around the main doorway, lighting around the vehicle, this stuff we're going to want it to be continuous in order to deter criminals from wanting to come up to our home. Now, how can we get creative with this? Well, you could install motion sensor lighting in dead space so that if you were looking out at your yard and all of a sudden one of those lights goes off, that could tell you there's an object or person or animal, something is moving back there in that dead space that you cannot see. Now, if you have good defense in layers, which we talk a lot about, for example, right here, well, this motion sensor light goes off. Now you know that you could look at this camera here to really see, hey, what's going on over here? Is there somebody over there? And if there are, cool, now you know where they're at. And if not, and it's an animal, hey, whatever, recalibrate your motion sensor lighting so that it doesn't get easily tripped by a moving branch. Now, motion sensor lighting underneath trees, I like solar stuff if you have good sun exposure for those lights. I love it, works great lumens, great visibility. The other thing that you could do though is have like these footpath motion sensor lights. So if somebody comes walking up your footpath here or walking, let's say, across your footpath here, you could have a couple of these motion sensor lights go off. And again, because you have cameras pointed out in these directions, they are more likely to pick up that signature from that light turning on as opposed to just somebody walking past, especially if they're a little bit a ways away from your camera system. Now, if somebody's going from here up into this dead space, what do you know? A light goes off. Shit, so they're going to run over here. Another light goes off. Now they're going to have to retreat all the way back. Same thing here. This guy goes under here, light goes off. Damn it. He starts running over here, light goes off. Runs up to the bush. You have a motion sensor activated light over your window, light goes off. I like motion sensor activated lights over windows because when you're in a room and it's nighttime, you could really notice that motion sensor light going off instantly. And I've got some other videos that I put out there where it shows the effectiveness of a motion sensor light while you're in a room with the lights on and it's dark outside. You could tell right away that something is moving around out there. So deterrence lights, continuous lighting for doorways, but motion sensor lights, I like those a lot for the windows. And this is how we can begin to mitigate the effectiveness of dead space for the criminal in our yard. Now, here you can see I have this X example. Now, some people will put lights on the ground and shine them up into the bushes towards their house. And this is a huge no. We don't want lights, motion sensor lights or whatever, shining in to the window. What that's going to do is that's going to block out our ability to see anything. Think of a flashlight in your eye. You've already have the disadvantage if the lights are on in the house and it's nighttime, because when your lights are on, that glare in the window, you're going to see your own reflection when you try to look out into the dark. It's a dark backdrop, dark canvas. But on the outside, you could look in very easily. I've been right up on windows. Literally, my face is breathing in the window. And the only reason anybody started to see me is because they started to see my fog in the window. And yes, it was a training operation, so don't get any weird ideas. So we don't want lights shining up into the house. However, we could still put motion sensor lights on the ground that just light up the ground like these walkway ones do. And we could put these in here behind these bushes. And just serves as a really great way of identifying if somebody is back there or not. Now, let's talk about fields of fire. So, let's say that you're up here in this room and you have a son or a wife or somebody and they're super badass and they're up here in this room, and you guys have some criminals coming in on you. You notice them, and you decide, hey, we need to make sure that we defend our home, our livelihood, our way of living. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to establish left and right lateral limits. Lateral meaning sideways. And if I'm over here in this room, I'm going to tell my son, hey son, you have from, this tree, which we'll just mark this tree Alpha. And this would all be pre-designated beforehand in your family emergency response plan. You have tree Alpha over to, the end or the beginning of the walkway. We'll just call that area Bravo. And then I'll take from area Charlie all the way over to tree Delta. And what this is going to do is this is going to establish fields of fire. Use a light green marker for this one. So anybody passing within this area, my son is going to be a little bit further over, responsible for. Anybody in this area, I am going to be responsible for. And so if we have a group of rioters or organized criminals that are attempting to move up on our house in a bounding fashion by utilizing dead space for cover and concealment, now we have a great defense and lair strategy. They attempt to come up in the dead space, the light goes off, the camera identifies them, and we can see who they are, possibly even communicate through the wireless speakers. They try to run to another position of cover and concealment, same process. Motion sensor light goes off, camera's there. So now we can actually see them moving. If we can't actually see the person, individual, we can see the lights going off. We know their direction of travel, we know their direction of movement, while we're up here in the house getting ready to arm ourselves and to take up a fighting position against this armed group of criminals. Then we can assign different sectors of fields of fire to our other family members if they're, of course, capable and competent firearms users. So now that we have pre-designated sectors of fire, you don't have to scan the entire yard. You can just focus on particular areas. So as my son is focusing on this area over here, he sees some lights go off behind this tree. Now his weapon system is going to be slung over towards that tree. And he's going to be able to make a determination like, hey, I think they're going to try to run closer to the house. That's the side that I would err on in terms of like leading the target. Or they might decide, hey, I can't get hidden, so I'm just going to go ahead and retreat back over this way. That's okay, because we could easily slow our gun over in that direction if we see them actually running away from the house. But we always want to err on the side of what's coming closest to us. So that's where I would position my gun. Like, hey, I see the tree, here's my house, I'm going to position right here, because if they make a move for it this way, start coming closer, I'll be able to engage them. If they make a movement for it that way, hey, that's fine. Maybe I'll miss. But now I've at least bought myself more time because they're moving further away from the house. That's a small victory. That's a little tactical victory in a gunfight. So ultimately, this is how we develop fields of fire. This is how we utilize dead space and defilade within our yard, how we could minimize the impact when it comes to our home safety and personal defense. And if you guys have any questions on this stuff, of course, reach out. Let me know your thoughts. Do you have assigned fields of fire? Do you have dead space in your yard? Do you utilize motion sensor lights, continuous lighting, or camera systems in conjunction with one another? Or do you do something different? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like it, share it if you found it helpful. And if you really want to get down deep into the weeds on this stuff for your home, join Lethality University, Lethal U, over at JoeMaloneTraining.com.